appreciate the reminder that for some of us, we find entrepreneurship by accident. And while that was certainly not my case, it was the case of our guest today on today's episode. Today we have Morgan Specht on the podcast. Morgan is the creative director, brand strategist, and founder of Specht and Co creative studio. And she found entrepreneurship by accident when she realized that the marketing agency life wasn't for her, and she was caused to accidentally start her own business. And what I really appreciated about our episode today is that I only just recently met Morgan, but there is something about speaking with fellow empaths that just allows you to go deep and speak to the heart so quickly. And today's episode is just that. We talk a lot about Morgan's entrepreneurial journey, how she realized that she had to upgrade her business boundaries, and who she was willing to work with in her business as a result of some burnout and exhaustion that she experienced early on. And she talks all about growing her business in a way that feels good despite what typical business advice tells you. Could she be in a more perfect place? Let's jump in. Hello and welcome to the Prosperous Empath Podcast, designed especially for empaths and highly sensitive entrepreneurs just like you who are committed to achieving holistic success. I'm your host, Catherine Wood, Master Certified Coach, author, mastermind leader, and founder of Unbounded Potential, a boutique coaching firm for empathic entrepreneurs. I'm on a mission to bring empathy back into the world of business. Each episode will focus on achieving more by doing less through leveraging empath-friendly leadership practices, boundaries, rituals, and systems, all the while continuing to care deeply about ourselves, others, and the world around us. If you are committed to joyful living and running a conscious business, but amassing wealth while doing so, proving that you can have both in a society that tells you you can't, then you are in the right place. Join me here each week to find out how. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review so you won't miss an episode. Plus, you'll find all the show notes and helpful resources over at unbounded-potential.com. Morgan, I'm so excited to have you here today. Why don't we just jump right in? I'd love for you to share with my audience a little bit about who you are and your story, your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here also. Thanks for having me. So I'm Morgan, obviously. I'm a brand strategist and designer and website designer. My business is Specht and Co creative studio. I've been in business full-time since 2018 and kind of was like doing the side hustle thing from about 2016 to 2018. So we design brands, obviously, Squarespace websites, Kajabi websites, and like courses and memberships. And then I also do like ongoing design support for clients on like a monthly basis. And kind of, I don't know, I like to tell people that I wound up here by accident. So I knew like in high school that I wanted to be a graphic designer. And so that was very easy for me to like be like, okay, well, check these boxes, follow these steps, get a job, yada, yada. And I did that and everything went exactly according to my plan. And then I got into my agency role that I was so excited about. And it took me like 6 months to be like, I don't like this at all. And it wasn't the work that I didn't like. I got to work on some like really cool projects for big companies. So it was a great experience, but it was just like the culture was not a fit. And then I started talking to other people who worked at other marketing agencies and learned that that's just kind of the way it is. And I was like, I can't do this for my entire life. So I like did some job searching, found another full-time job as an in-house designer that was more of like an energy match, I guess, which afforded me a lot more free time. And then I was like, well, I don't know what to do with my free time. I'm just going to start freelancing. And then after the first year, kind of realized, oh, I could like turn this into something and maybe I could work for myself sooner than I thought. I remember being like, oh, maybe when I'm 40 and I have kids or whatever, then being self-employed would be cool. But I never really thought it was a possibility now until I kind of fell into it. And then here we are.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I so appreciate that, like that pathway to entrepreneurship, the idea of falling into it, because I think many of us become entrepreneurs by accident.
Yeah. If you had told me when I was like 19 in my like first or second year of college, oh, you're going to own your own business and work from home and hang out with your dogs all day, I would have been like, that sounds nice. Like, good joke. Thanks.
I'm literally over here muting myself because one of my dogs keeps wagging her tail in her sleep.
Yep. I've got one behind me and I don't know what it is, but yeah, they make the best coworkers.
What was that journey like for you of transitioning to business full time?
Well, I had a business coach for like that whole period, which was very, very, very helpful. I don't think I would have made the leap without her. Because I'm very like security oriented. Mm-hmm. Like I need to know that no one's going to take my house away and I'm going to have a paycheck next month and all of those things. And entrepreneurship is very uncertain. In some months you make 5 figures and some months you're like scraping together pennies, and eventually it all evens out. And the longer that you're in business, the ups and downs kind of become less extreme. But yeah, I think having that support was really helpful, and like having someone to go to whenever I was having a bad day and have her remind me like, no, you look at all the evidence that you can do this. So that was good. My husband was also really supportive, so that was nice. And I think the biggest hurdle for me was like proving to myself that I could do it, I guess is the best way I can put it. I'm like a planner and I want to know how everything's going to work out. And I couldn't really do that, but I could look back and be like, well, last year I made this much money, or I worked with this many clients. So, and that was only doing it on nights and weekends. So if I can devote my full time, then I should be okay.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, I so resonate with everything you're sharing, because I also am very fear averse. And as entrepreneurs, I think our work is about becoming more comfortable with fear, learning how to weather the storm, gaining more resiliency with taking risks. And sometimes we think that some of us have it and some of us don't. But honestly, I think it's just a muscle you strengthen and get more comfortable with over time. And I see you laughing over there.
Yeah, I just like couldn't agree more. It's funny because like now I'm very okay with taking risks, and I can like look back and be like, well, I tried all these things and some of them worked and some of them didn't, but like I'm still here and my business hasn't burned to the ground and things are fine. So I think it's a lot about learning to trust yourself and being like okay with it if things don't work out. I don't necessarily like associate my self-worth with every single thing I try working out anymore. So that's been helpful. And then also, I don't know, when you're a kid and you think of like, oh, adults have it all together and they know what they're doing. And then you get there and you're like, oh, none of us know what we're doing. We're all just making it up as we go, which could be a little unsettling, but also kind of makes me feel better because I'm like, well, okay, everyone feels this way and most of us are doing all right.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think we think that the idea is like that we're supposed to get somewhere in adulthood, when in reality, like I think adulthood is about embracing the journey.
Mm-hmm. I, for my whole life, expected that like someday I was going to wake up and be like, okay, I got this. And then once I like really accepted the fact of like, that's never going to happen. It's a forever work in progress and that's fine. I don't know. I don't want to say life got easier, but I felt more equipped to like deal with the ups and downs.
I mean, yes, 1000% yes. You know, when we were chatting about you coming on my podcast, I asked you if you identified as being an empath. And I remember you said, well, I mean, yes, I think I respond like I'm an empathetic listener. I think you responded that way. And then you shared with me earlier before we hit record that you did some research after that call. So I'd love to hear what you discovered about yourself.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, after like we had that conversation, then I was like, well, I don't know. Like instinctively, I want to say yes, but is there a test for are you an empath? Like, no, there's not. There's a lot of like lists of characteristics and checklists and stuff on the internet. And I looked through some of those and was like, okay, yeah, a lot of these fit. And I also remembered back to like several years ago, a friend of mine talking to me about how she felt like she was an empath. And like all the stuff she was telling me totally fit her. And then I was like, well, actually, some of that fits me too. So like the experiencing other people's emotions as if your own emotions. Not so much like, I don't feel like I'm necessarily highly sensitive, but if I'm like around somebody who's in a bad mood or they're in a really good mood or whatever, like they can be hiding it from
Totally.
99% of people. And I'm like, no, something's up. Like,
Yeah.
and I mean, I notice it. Well, actually, I notice it like in my personal relationships, like with my husband is the best example, but also with clients. So like my husband will wake up and be like having a bad day and I'll be like, what's wrong? And then he like doesn't want to bother, like burden me with it. And he's like, nothing. And I'm like, okay, whenever you're ready to tell me, like, you know, but then with clients too, like a lot of what I work with them on is like stepping into that next level of themselves and their business and how does that show up online. And there's always a point where they're like a little unsure of themselves and they're like, well, I don't really know if this is the right thing to do, or like kind of like feeling the like imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years especially, I've gotten pretty good at like, I know that that's what they're feeling even though they don't know that that's what they're feeling, and as such I can kind of like support them through that. So that's been nice.
Mm-hmm.
The other things I think that I noticed, like whenever I was doing research online, was like, you're probably an introvert. Like I am absolutely an introvert. There's no probably about it. So yeah, I think those were like the really big ones. And it also started to make a lot of sense of like why I found the career path or like the specialty.
Oh, tell me more. I'd love to hear about that.
I don't want to be the center of attention. Like I've finally over the last like year gotten comfortable like showing up on Instagram and recording videos and stuff. And that's great. But even when my husband and I got married, he had to like pretty much force me to do a first dance with him because I was like, I don't want everyone like standing in a circle staring at us. And it wasn't that I was like embarrassed. I just was like, we don't need to waste time with that. It's not that important. So as a brand designer, I get to put my clients in the forefront and I get to kind of like hang back and I don't know, pull the strings kind of. And I get to know them really well and I can express who they are and help them like connect with their audience through branding and design and websites and et cetera. And I get to kind of sit in the corner where I'm comfortable.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like you're speaking to so many gifts that empath entrepreneurs have, like the idea that we can encourage and support others when they're doubting themselves or questioning who they really are or their potential. And also the idea that we're really great at making our clients I guess like being of service, right? We're natural givers. We're good at making others feel, I don't know, special, like just being like having an amazing customer experience.
Yeah. And that's like one of the most important like core values or pillars or whatever you want to call it in my business is I don't ever want a client to leave feeling like they were not like 110% fully supported. And it's interesting because there's a lot of like web designers out there. And often I get clients who come to me that have had a poor experience in the past. So they're like a little apprehensive and we have to work through some of that. But to me, it's just like, I can't help but give them everything that they need and more. And like, I could never imagine ghosting them or being like, oh no, you need to pay me more for this, just because that's not who I am. And it took me a while to realize that like everyone is not that way.
I think that's powerful. The reminder that, we don't want people to have a negative experience with us. I think it can get in the way of getting hired, but then I think it can also kind of hold people back from, I don't know, saying everything that you see that there is for your clients to do or to take on. So I'm curious, the experience, the commitment of giving your clients like everything you've got, right? Of contributing 110%. How does that, what do you see as the gifts of that in your business? And are there ways in which that challenges you?
Yeah. So as you were saying that, I had a bunch of thoughts of like, it's definitely a double-edged sword. Like the thing that makes me and anyone who's like empathetic, I think, the best at what they do is also the thing that they need to like be careful of. I feel like the first year that I was full-time in my business, I like severely burnt myself out. I was making a ton of money and my clients were all super happy with me and that was awesome. But I was having to spend like an hour in the morning, like psyching myself up for work because I was having so much anxiety. Mm. And it was because I didn't have any boundaries. Before we hopped on this call, we were chatting about taking Mondays off as CEO days. So that's just one like really small example of things that I've kind of implemented over the last, I don't know, probably 2 years or so, that has helped me to not so much like separate life and work. Like I'm really of the belief that everything is just intertwined all the time. Like there's no perfect balance. Sometimes one thing takes up more of your time and your energy, and sometimes that will shift to the other thing, and that's fine. But it took a long time for me to learn that like having good boundaries was not just for me. It also allowed me to serve my clients better. Because like you said, like I want everyone to be happy with me and to have everything that they need. And I will do that at the expense of myself. Mm-hmm. And then once it got to the point that I was like, I couldn't show up for my clients anymore because I was so stressed out or I was getting sick or whatever, that's when I was like, okay, there's got to be like some type of happy medium here. And I figured out like, what boundaries I needed to put in place. And turns out my clients were super supportive, mm-hmm. But I guess had to get to like that really uncomfortable place before I was willing to, I don't know, be a little bit vulnerable with people and be like, hey, so for my own sanity, I need to have like these rules and expectations. And then of course they all were like, oh yeah, no, I totally support that. That's great. And things have gotten better and better since then.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, I totally acknowledge you for being on that journey and finding your own way. I think that is something I see all the time with all of my clients. And it is such a journey. It's such a journey of being able and willing to articulate your needs and your boundaries to the clients and people whose opinions you care about, and trust that they care too.
And I think that's the thing is, I don't know, this might seem kind of unrelated, but I promise it's not. So like whenever you first start your business and you are like looking through Pinterest for how to figure out who your ideal client is or whatever. And a lot of advice will have you go through all these exercises of like, where do they shop and how much money do they make? And do they have dogs or cats or whatever? And I always, frankly, was like, these are stupid. Like, this isn't helping me at all. And it took me a little while to kind of realize, which I guess is another good sign of like being an empath, of like, these these people have to check all these boxes in order to be my perfect client. It's like an energetic match, and I need to talk with them and like meet them, even if it's on Zoom. And I know right away, and they know right away. And at the point in my business where I was really burning myself out, I had not yet made that realization. So I really thought that these people only valued me for the service that I could provide them, and not like because I was a person who they enjoyed and cared about. And the fact that I was a great brand and web designer was wonderful, but that's not all I was to them.
I couldn't agree more. Coming back to what we were talking about earlier about some of the gifts that empath entrepreneurs have in business, I think that quality of just intuitively knowing whether clients are for us or not is such a game changer in business, because when you can start to trust those decisions and either bless and release them or just make that gut instinct choice, it creates so much more flow and fluidity in business.
Yeah. And that's, I talked about this in the beginning as far as like making the jump to running my business full time, but learning to trust my own gut has been huge. I used to suffer a lot from like decision paralysis. Like I was so afraid to make the decision that I would just not do anything. And now that I've kind of learned to like, I don't know, listen to my intuition and trust that like I do know what the right answer is. It's made a huge difference in like not taking on clients who are not a good fit, which is bad for me and bad for them. And just normal, like everyday life stuff. My husband and I moved recently, and there was like 2 options of houses that we could pick. And he kind of was like, I don't care, whichever one you want. It's all the same to me. You decide. And I was like, I don't know. And then I kind of like just stopped and was like, okay, like which one is the right one? And like just took a minute and listened to myself and was like, oh, it's this one. And so far seems like I made the right choice. So that trust in your gut thing is huge. And it doesn't come easy. Like you were saying earlier, it's like a muscle. I feel like it's one of those things that a lot of people think I should just know, I should just be able to do this. And at least for me, that was not the case.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I feel like we are having a kindred spirit conversation right now. I feel like I could be talking to a coach, because these are conversations I have with all my colleagues. But I guess my question is, are there practices, or what was that journey for you to get to a place of trusting your gut or learning how to? Because I think that is the $1 million question for so many of the people that I talk to all the time.
You probably feel like you're talking to a coach, because I've worked with a few really
okay.
coaches in the past. So it works. There's your little plug for it's worth it to hire a coach. One of the things that the last business coach who I worked with, and like, I don't like to be like, oh, just a business coach. Cause it's, like I said, there's not a separation between business and life. But she used to have me write down like examples in the past of when things have gone right for me, whenever I like made decisions I wasn't sure about, and then it worked out better than I expected or exactly how I wanted or whatever. So she would have me do that. And at first it was really hard. And then it started like, I got to the point where I could like fill a whole page pretty easily. And then I would notice things like that as they were happening, like in real time. So I think that was a big one. Like I said, I'm a big like planning research, like I need to have hard evidence of things. So being able to like stick up a list on my wall next to my desk and be like, oh, look, there's 10 times where I made a scary decision and it worked out for the better. I would say that is probably like my single most helpful one. And also not rushing in. Like you might not know what the right decision is now. And then you might think about it again tomorrow and it might be obvious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that practice from your coach. And I also, it makes me think of what you were sharing earlier about like tracking your data, like trusting the ebbs and flows of business, because it makes me think of something I say a lot in my mastermind, which is the idea that what you track, you manage. Like what you track and keep tabs of, you can make conscious choices around.
Yeah. The way that I've heard that explained is what gets measured gets improved. And it's kind of like, I was like really focusing on like health and fitness all of last year. And that was one of the things where I was like, I don't want to take progress pictures and write down my weight and log my food and blah, 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 blah. And my husband kind of encouraged me of like, just try it, like do it for a month and see if it makes a difference. And sure enough, and I think mostly it has to do with like just keeping it top of mind. And like I said, having that list that I can just look over and be like, oh, there's some evidence, really makes a huge difference, even if it's kind of subconscious.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I'm just smiling. Your husband sounds super amazing and supportive.
He is. He's pretty good at pushing me whenever I need it, which I think as like an empath and an introvert, I don't like to be uncomfortable. But that's like where growth happens, right? So I'm very grateful that I have someone in my life who can gently nudge me when I need it.
Mm-hmm. And it's so true. The idea, like and I like how you, the reframing, what you measure gets improved, because we so often don't want to know, like we don't want to know the weight on the scale or the dollars in the bank or the number of clients whose contracts are coming up on completion, right? I've heard that one a lot. And we can't improve what we aren't aware of. We can't close the gap if we don't know what the gap is.
Mm-hmm. And I think in my experience, at least, it's never as bad as you think it is. Like you'll like psych yourself up and be so worried of like, oh, I can't log into the bank account or step on the scale or whatever. And then, at least in my case, every time that I've done it, I've been like, oh, okay, we're okay. Like that was not as traumatic as I thought it was going to be. So it's also like not letting it have that power over you, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, not letting it have that power over you. I could not agree more. I shared a podcast about this, I think last year, about my own rebranding experience last year. It was a very year-long journey with a whole new brand, a whole new website, like everything. And one thing I really appreciated through that process was, I mean, my brander was also a coach, but there felt like there was actually a lot of overlap between visualizing the next iteration of my brand while embodying and stepping into the next version of who I'm becoming. So, like the branding conversation and the coach conversation, there was a lot of overlap there. So I'm curious, I mean, first of all, is that your experience having worked with a couple coaches and being a brander and designer?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, it's so
cool.
Much on my like 2023/2024 goals list to go get a coaching certificate, because I'm like, I'm already doing some of it.
You are.
And I would like to learn more and get better at it.
Especially as an empath, like picking up on your clients' imposter syndromes and being able to remind them of who they are and normalize that experience, right? Like that we all have that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's funny that you bring that up. And yeah, I've hired several coaches, like, and worked with them myself, which has been an absolute game changer in my life and in my business. I also have had many different types of coaches as clients. And if I had to put a number on it, I would say probably at least 80% of my non-coach clients have coaches that they work with. So like,
interesting.
Our worlds are very much intertwined.
Huh.
I think part of it is that anybody can go design a pretty brand, right? Or buy a pre-made template off of Etsy or whatever. And it will look great, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to connect you with your people. You mentioned your own rebrand, and I think I mentioned this to you a while ago of like, it's beautiful. It looks great. And all I had to do was like I didn't even have to listen to your podcast to know that like, this is somebody that I want to learn more from.
Mm-hmm.
And that has everything to do with your colors and the way your website's laid out and your photos. That's a huge one. And that's not by happenstance. Like the person who you worked with did all of that very, very, very purposefully. So I think that's also the big difference, and like kind of where coaching and being an empath and being a designer on all of those things really kind of work together to like make something really special, is that I can get to know you and I can make your website and your Instagram and whatever we're working on speak to your people in a way that grabbing something off the internet or DIYing it in Canva just is not going to be able to do.
I like how you use the word purposeful, because I think that is something I mean, it's hugely important for me. Like it's one of my values, but I do think that business owners who are thriving online these days are purposeful. They bring a lot of intention and clarification of their mission and their vision, and you can tell.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to get like kind of irritated when people would tell me, "Oh, you're so lucky that you get to work from home," or "You're so lucky that you and your husband have such a great relationship," or "You're so lucky that," whatever, fill in the blank. And I was like, I am the least lucky person in the entire like I've won on a scratch ticket like one time in my entire life. I never win games at the fair. Like I don't find money on the ground. I'm not lucky. All of that was on purpose. And I think that same goes for business. Like if you're not actively deciding, this is who I want to work with, this is what I want to do, this is where I want to be in 5 years, you can't just let things happen to you. Which is an interesting balance between like the empath introvert thing of, like I said, like not wanting to be uncomfortable and not wanting to like push myself outside of my comfort zone, because you kind of have to.
100%. Like, I can so relate with that idea. Like, oh, must be nice working from home. Must be nice earning that much money. Must be nice only taking client calls 3 days a week. Yes, it is nice. And do you know how many years and hours that it took to get to this place of consciously choosing it and creating it and pivoting and revising and realigning and learning?
People aren't going to be able to see because this is just a podcast, but I like had a huge eye roll whenever you said, "Oh, it must be nice," because that's the same thing. I'm like, I didn't just like wake up one day and this was my life. Like my like specific phrasing is always like, all of this has been very on purpose, and it's been a lot of work and a lot of time, and I've had to like make myself very uncomfortable to get to the point where I get to wear slippers to work and take my dogs for a walk whenever I want and choose only which clients I want to work with. Like, it wasn't always this way.
It is absolutely a practice in surrender and trust to know you have an opening in your business and to say no because it's a misaligned fit.
Yep. One of my, and I actually just did this recently, big like things that I never realized would be so liberating was firing clients. So I had, because in the beginning you take on everybody. You're like, I need money, I need the experience, you have money, great, let's do it. And just recently I had a monthly design support client who it wasn't my fault or their fault. It was just what they were wanting was kind of a departure from what I was wanting to offer. And our businesses were growing in different directions. And like any relationship, like they don't always last forever. And I was able to very empathetically kind of approach them and be like, okay, so I've really loved working with you and you're great. And this has been great. And I'm so appreciative of the time that we spent together. But based on what you're telling me you need, I don't think I'm the person for the job anymore. And that's okay. And if you want, I can help you find somebody, but I don't want to be taking your money and your time and your energy and agreeing to do something that doesn't feel in alignment with me because you're not going to get a good final product. So let's figure out how to get you that. And they were very appreciative, which I think some people wouldn't always expect.
I appreciate that you used the word energy, because I think specifically for prosperous empaths, it is so important to manage and honor your energy, because we're such natural givers that when we are expending our energy to misaligned fits or people or commitments, we only have a limited amount of energy. So we're not offering it to the places and people that are, just hell yes opportunities and engagements.
Yeah. Before I don't know, I guess just learned those things about myself, I frequently used to be think that I was acting crazy or being unreasonable, or I just needed to suck it up and work harder, or be nice to these people anyway, or there's no reason for you not to like them. And then once I kind of started looking at it of oh, it's just for whatever reason, working with this client really drains my energy, or even things as simple as you looking at my calendar and being I don't have anything that needs to be done today. And I really feel like I need to go for a walk or rest or just take it easy this morning, and realizing that that's okay. And then all of a sudden, everything was easier. It was amazing.
I am totally chuckling over here, because for someone who only recently distinguished that they were an empath, you have so many of natural empathic tendencies and ways of being and habits.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
We kind of touched briefly on this before we started recording of I think I have always known that I was an empath. I just didn't know that's what it was called. I didn't have words for it, but I knew all of those things about myself. That's not a new discovery. It's maybe a new discovery within the last 10 years. But it's interesting. Once you can put a label on it, it kind of changes things.
Yeah. I mean, totally. Well, if people are interested in connecting with you or wanting to learn more about you, where should they reach you?
Yeah. I would say Instagram is probably the best place. If you're just wanting to learn about my services, then my website's great. But as far as getting to know me as a person and being friends and making connections, I spend most of my time on Instagram. My handle's at Specht and Co.
Awesome. We will totally put that in the show notes. And for someone who's considering a new website, considering a rebrand, how would they know? And specifically for our empathic listeners, what should they be listening or tuning into?
Yeah. So if you're not like me and can just have a gut feeling that you just know, my kind of top three, and I think goes for branding or website, are, well, actually top one. I'll just give you one because that's really the kicker. If you're not showing up for your business, if you're I don't want to post on Instagram because my graphics are ugly. I don't want to send people to my website because it doesn't work correctly. I don't want to apply for podcast guest opportunities because then people are going to find me and I don't like what they're going to see. Then it's probably time to evaluate your brand.
Oh my gosh. That is gold. That's why I rebranded last year. Literally legit that reason.
Yeah. And people make all kinds of other excuses for oh, it's because this or that, or I just need to do this thing or do that thing. But it's really, I sometimes like to liken it to clothing. You never want to leave the house because you're I don't have anything to wear. Then it's time to go shopping and get some new clothes that make you feel good.
Oh, Morgan, this is so true. I literally 2 years ago, I was on my mastermind call that I run, and we were talking about being authentically self-expressed online. And one of my clients reflected, she's like, Kat, I look at your Instagram and these pictures, they don't feel like you. Like, it doesn't feel like you. And I was like, oh, it's so true. You're so right. Because for all the photo shoots that I had done for my first 5-6 years in business, like I put on makeup, I straightened my hair, and I tried to be someone other than who I was. And, we've just met each other, but like, I don't ever wear makeup and I never straighten my hair. Yep. So it was so wild, just to not even feel like yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's very common, especially when you're like newer in business. You do the thing that you think you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. And then you spend a lot of money. So you think, oh, but I need to use it.
And then
you don't.
especially if you're a coach. I think that creates a really big problem whenever you have the heels and the makeup and the hair and the whatever. And then someone shows up to a call with you and you've got your dog in the background and your hair's more natural and you're wearing like a really cozy sweater. That, first of all, they're not getting what they expect. So there's a disconnect and kind of makes them be like, well, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't trust this lady. But then also, you're missing out on all of the people who need exactly what you are, because they're not going to approach the lady with the red lipstick and the heels. They want the lady with the dog and the cozy sweater.
Absolutely. Like, Morgan, you are talking to my soul. You're talking to like my people's soul. So I love that we had an excuse to connect through this podcast. It's been really fun to get to know you. And, I started this podcast because I was committed to normalizing prosperity for empaths, because I am such a believer that if we brought more wealth and success to those who care so empathetically and generously as empaths, that we could truly transform the business world. So what has supported you most in becoming a prosperous empath?
Oh boy, I had to pick one thing. I would probably say investing in myself, and not just financially, I think is a big thing. For a long time, kind of back to the people pleaser thing, like didn't want to take up space and thought, I'm fine. I don't need to like go get my hair done. That's like one of the things that like really makes me feel good. Or I don't need to buy the fancy coffee maker so that I can like feel good through my workday. Or I don't need to spend money on a business coach because I could put that money somewhere else. So really kind of embracing the fact that like I deserve to spend money and time and energy on myself has, I think, made the biggest difference and allowed me to then, like we said, like pour into everybody else so much better.
So good. Like when you feel your best, you do your best, you serve your best.
It's not selfish to do all of those things.
Morgan, thank you so much. I can't wait for this episode to air.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening today to this episode of the Prosperous Empath Podcast with me, Catherine Wood. Make sure you subscribe and leave a review so you don't miss an episode, and so more empaths just like you and me can find the show. As a thank you, each month, one lucky reviewer will receive a 60-minute coaching session with a member of our Unbounded Potential team. You can find all the show notes and bonus resources over at unbounded-potential.com. Thank you so much for listening and locking arms with me to bring empathy and prosperity back into the world of business.